Hello, welcome to the lesson on Development, Globalization and Society. Today's module is Dependency Theory. Today we are going to learn what are the assumptions of Dependency Theory to begin with. The Dependency Theory emerged in the 1960s as a response to Modernization Theory, which stated that underdeveloped countries are just at the previous stage of development as compared to the developed country and that they would eventually catch up. Modernization theory sought to map out the path of development that society would follow in a bid to shed traditional ways and values and to adopt a modern outlook that embraced rapid economic development and growth in the world market. The emergence of the dominant economies is based on factors like advancement in technology, sophistication of production process, the resources available to a country, and the level of skill of its workers. The dependency theory, on the other hand, states that the developed country form the core of the world market and the underdeveloped countries form the periphery, and the resources flow from the periphery to the core, and the core continues to make economic gains at the expense of the periphery. The dependency theory was a result of the Prebys-Singer hypothesis, which stated that the price of primary commodity declines in relation to the price of manufactured goods over a period of time, which leads to the deterioration of economies that are based on primary commodities. Now let's see what further we need to understand in this concept. Primarily in the economic relationship between the core and the periphery, the core enjoys favorable terms of trade and conversely, the periphery suffers from disadvantageous terms of trade. Terms of trade can be interpreted as the amount of import goods an economy can purchase per unit of export goods. Favorable terms of trade for an economy would be when the amount of goods imported are in balance with more or less than the amount of goods exported. A higher ratio of imports with respect to exports puts the country at a disadvantageous position. The dominant economies dictate the term of trade and the economies that are at disadvantage have no choice but to follow, often to their own detriment. In other words, the quantity of manufactured goods that the underdeveloped countries trade from the developed countries in exchange for the raw material decreases over a period of time. In a situation of equal productivity in developed countries and less developed country, the lower wages in the less developed country and the high products of the developed countries are exchanged for low price products of the lower developed countries. Hence, the exchange is unequal. One can use the Marxian theory of transformation of value into prices to show that the less developed country are compelled to sell their goods at a price below their value and to purchase goods from developed countries at a higher rates. Obviously, this is unseemingly unfair to the less developed country, whereas it is advantageous. On the other hand, developed countries can get commodities from the less developed country at lower prices than would have been available in their own country. In this process of exchange, LDC, that is a less developed country, stand as losers and developed countries are gainers. In this sense, dependency theory is a possible way of explaining the persistent poverty of the poorer countries. The relationship of dependence exists between two groups, namely the center and the periphery. The center consists of the countries that have undergone economic growth at their own pace and have developed technological advancement to suit their needs and requirements. The periphery consists of those countries that have adopted the economic models of growth that have yielded results for the developed country. These members of the periphery have not achieved optimal utilization of their own resources and depend either heavily or in part on the exports made from the developed countries. Let's understand how this process has acquired an exploitative overtone. The two types of country are also known as dominant dependent or metropolitan satellite societies. Similarly, core countries are also known as more economically developed countries or simply as developed countries. Periphery countries are also known as less economically developed country or simply as underdeveloped or developing countries. The underdeveloped countries are still in one of the previous stages of development as compared to the developed stages. Dependency theory rejects the definition of underdeveloped as given by modernization theorists. According to the dependency theorist, modernization approach reduces the very nature of underdeveloped economy to the primitive as opposed to different from the developed economy and denies or ignores their history. The economy of the underdeveloped country is directly affected by any changes or fluctuations in the economic conditions of the developed country. This makes the dependent nature of the relationship between the developed and the underdeveloped economies apparent. Dependency theory is historic. This dependency is historical in nature. Let's understand how. The dependent relationship has been ongoing since the first technological advancements were made and commercial use was established, giving certain countries an economic advantage over the others. The resources that are available at the disposal of underdeveloped country are being used to their potential, but the advantage of these resources goes to the developed countries. Okay, after discussing this, let's now look at the other assumptions that are there underlying the dependency theory. The raw material was acquired in return for manufactured good, but there has always been a discrepancy in the values of the commodities in question, and this discrepancy continually keeps on increasing. In relation to the underdeveloped country to whom these resources actually belong, they reap no benefit in terms of their utilization. The elites within the underdeveloped country help maintain the dependency relationship that already exists. The interests of the elite of the underdeveloped country align with those of the developed country, and as such they see no reason to upset the existing system of dependence. The ones who are affected by the exploitative nature of the dependency relationship are the poor of the underdeveloped countries. A common national economic interest should be established along with the backing and protection of the government of the underdeveloped country so as to protect the interest of the underdeveloped economy. The needs of the poor should be one of the deciding factors in determining which course of action should be adopted to safeguard the interest of the underdeveloped economy as a whole. So we see that there is an urgent need to understand that dependency theory was talking about the process which led to this exploitative situation. Let's understand dependency theory from a neo-Marxist and power perspective. According to the neo-Marxist view, the capitalist system in the world market establishes a division of labor between the developed and the underdeveloped country. The underdeveloped country supply cheap raw material in the form of natural resources, agricultural produce, and human resources, both skilled and unskilled, to the developed nation. Additionally, they serve as the market for obsolete technology, manufactured and consumer goods that no longer have a demand in the domestic market of the developed countries. Many a time, developing countries serve as a dumping ground for the developed countries. It is the interest of the developed country that are always taken into consideration and not the needs of the underdeveloped countries. The immediate need of the underdeveloped state are met, but no efforts are made to devise innovation that are suited to the requirement and resources of the underdeveloped country. Instead, underdeveloped countries divert their spending towards the consumption of goods and services that flow in from the developed countries. This contributes to the overall poverty of the underdeveloped country, and the disparity and dependency between the underdeveloped and developed country continues to grow. The neo-Marxist perspective is primarily supported by Paul Barra and Andre Gunder Frank. Barra maintained that third world countries were marketed by small industrial sector and large agricultural sectors, which was not immensely profitable on a world scale. He further emphasized that class relation and the unequal distribution of power as chief impediments in the way of development. He believed that internal conditions were the source of the major problem in underdeveloped country and advocated state intervention for promoting regulated industrialization as a precondition for evolution of other industrial sector. On the other hand, Andre Gunder Frank believed that underdevelopment is rooted in the scheme of metropoles and satellites. Metropoles are the large merchant capital and satellites are the underdeveloped countries. The sole purpose of the satellite is to meet the needs of the metropoles through distribution of resources from the satellite to the metropoles. For him, the solution was third world countries delinking themselves from the world market in order to develop instead of distributing their own resources to the metropoles. Hence, for him, external factors like colonialism were responsible for the existence of the underdevelopment. Now, after looking at these two scholars' contribution to dependency theory, let's look at the power perspective. Most dependency theorists regard international capitalism as a motive force behind dependency relationship. According to this view, the capitalist system enforces a rigid international division of labor, which is responsible for the underdevelopment of many areas of the world. However, some dependency theories do not identify capitalism as the force behind a dependent relationship. They feel that the dominance-dependence relationship is sustained by a system of power first, and this power is not supported by capitalism only. Power could emanate from control over technology, information, and knowledge, etc. Here, the possibility is that dependency is more closely linked to disparities of power rather than to particular characteristics of a given economic system. The power perspective sees the state of affairs as more complicated than the capitalist framework of the world market. The dependent relationship between the dominant and dominated country is self-perpetuating. That is, unless there is external disruption, the dependent and exploitative relationship continues to exist. The existence of dominant country does not come to an end as they fight for world resources as given under the Marxist-Leninist framework. The dominant countries might change in identity depending on who acquires power once the struggle settles and the economic relationship of dominant and dependent states continue with different players. The dependency is not only based on the capitalist nature of the world market and international economics, but also on the disparity of power that exists between the different countries. The countries that are economically strong and technologically advanced hold power over the lesser developed countries in terms of trade. It is this power that enables a developed country to maintain their dominant position, and the dependent and exploitative relationship between the developed and underdeveloped countries continues, supported by capitalists working, giving developed economies economic superiority. The underdeveloped country should not use the developed country as models of economic growth and try to imitate their developmental path. The underdeveloped country should examine their own needs and aspiration and arrive at a developmental model that best suits their need and fully utilizes the resources available to them. The neoclassical model assumes that as an economic growth takes place, the reward will be spontaneously flow down or trickle down to reach the lowest groups in the economy. It assumes that stagnation of wealth will not take place and that consumption pattern will change to accommodate economic development. The trickle-down effect that neoclassical models or developmental theories support is repudiated by the dependency theory. Dependency theory focuses on the optimum distribution of wealth. It argues that as yet, developing conditions in a growing economy leave for wealth to be concentrated in certain pockets, and measures should be undertaken to ensure that fair distribution of wealth takes place. This is where governmental policy comes in to ensure the same and to combat the impediments brought about by the as yet traditional consumption pattern governed by social and economic basis. Dependency theory makes a very clear distinction between economic development and economic growth. Economic growth is simply an increase in the goods and services produced in relation to the population of a country over a period of time. Growth is measured only in economic terms and is quantitative in nature. Economic development is a qualitative concept and takes into account the social indicators of growth and development. The aim of economic development is to bring about improvement in the overall standard of living while maintaining a growing per capita income. Other aspects of growth that come under economic development are improvement in the quality of human resources, better core infrastructure, health, education, safety, and other factors. Dependency theory makes economic development the aim of the growing economy, with economic growth a subcategory under the developmental process, and tries to achieve holistic results that benefit all sections of the society. The aim of the dependent economy should be to become self-reliant and eliminate or at least diminish the dependency on dominant economies. This can only be achieved when prospects of growth are undertaken while keeping the advantages in focus. A disadvantageous economic relationship will only foster dependence, and the requirement of the developing economy will be sidelined again. The dependency theory offers an incisive assessment of the politics in the underdeveloped country, along with an examination of the nature and scope of relation between them and the developed country, mostly using the center-periphery paradigm for this purpose. They define underdeveloped as a situation on dependency which has resulted from the expansion of world capitalism. Most dependency theorists favor socialism as the antidote against dependency and underdevelopment. Despite its popularity, it has faced certain criticism. Let's understand what are the critiques, major critiques used against the dependency theory. In the first place, dependency theories provide us divergent definition and perspective on underdevelopment and dependency. There's a lack of consensus among the dependency theory about the exact nature of dependence and underdevelopment, the mechanism involved in dependency relations, and the possible remedies. The underdevelopment of the third world has been largely attributed to the adoption of the capitalist model and exploitation and oppression by external forces, rather than looking at the internal failure of the underdeveloped countries to formulate and follow properly conceived and coordinated industrial policy, and instead managing to generate partial industrialization. A development model that relies heavily on governmental participation is not sustainable in the long run. With governmental control over the economic resources of an economy, instances of red tapeism and corruption would rise, which would again lead to consolidation of wealth in a few pockets, thereby doing governmental participation is supposed to correct. Its main focus is social welfare and maintenance of the status quo, which might stifle industrial innovation. There is a considerable resistance to change in this model, and as a result, economic development suffers. The rate at which development takes place will be slower, as the economy would have to adopt a trial and error method of working out which model suits its needs the best. In the meantime, the social cost of this delay is suffered by the poorer sections of the society, for who are supposed to benefit socially and economically from the developmental process. Hence, due to lack of consensus among its proponents regarding the definition, features, and solution for countering underdevelopment and dependency, the dependency theory is often accused of being not a theory but only a collection of several ideas. The popularity of dependency theory began to wane, as many real-time economic developments were seen as contradiction of the predictions made by this theory. However, the relevance of the dependency theory continues in its other form, and the model itself is still being adopted in some manner or the other. An obvious example has been the development of the Indian economy, as it opened itself to the open trade model, discarding the state control model in almost all the sectors. Despite all its weakness and the criticism directed against it, the theory must be lauded not only for highlighting the limitations of the theories of development, but also for its focus on the analysis of both the historical process, socio-economic, political, cultural factors of development and underdevelopment. To conclude, one cannot deny the existence of dependency within the prevailing and ever-increasing interdependence in the contemporary international relations. And yet there is a need for a rethink on the way development should be defined and striven for in this ever-changing times. The dependent economies should shift their focus from barely meeting their needs at the condition set by the developed economy and pursue a developmental model that it formulates after a careful evaluation of their strength, the resources available to them, their immediate and long-term needs. In the end, a model of self-reliance that is best suited to developing country should be the goal. Thank you.